Right, so we're going to finish our discussion on currency. And what I want to focus on is this trade-off of having monetary autonomy or having a fixed exchange rate. Right? So again, if you have a pile of money, which I will say is like this. This is my currency, so this is the Shea currency, not to be confused with dollars. Okay, and I'm going to say that for every 2 Shea dollars is equal to 1 US dollar. So 1 US. The wrong way, but there you go. That's the exchange rate. So if I have $200, I need to have $800 in reserve. And if I have $200 billion in my economy, I need to have $100 billion in US dollars locked away somewhere. Because if I go off and this is my little country, and I pay somebody, let's say $10 for some work, okay? That person, my great drawing, can go off to the bank or some treasury or whatever and exchange that 10 Shea dollars, these are Shea dollars, exchange that for 5 US dollars, right? And that's the way it works. And for every the dollar that's that is out in the economy has to be backed up with these US dollars or gold or whatever your exchange rate is. If I printed money and instead of having $400, $200, I decided to print even more money and have $400, but did not increase my reserves, people would run to the bank and exchange for as much US dollars as they could before all of this would essentially run out, right? And the people who did not get to the bank fast enough would be holding Shea dollars that was worthless, okay? So you can't just print money in a fixed exchange rate, or it devalues the value, the exchange rate of that currency. Right? And what we have now, what we're going to talk about is a unholy trinity. And the unholy trinity has 3 components to it. Right? And one component is monetary autonomy. Can you print money to affect your economy? Or can you have fixed exchange rates? And that's the real trade-off here that we're going to discuss about. And then the third component is capital controls. And this is a problem because we were talking about this exchange rate before, this sort of convoluted exchange process. One way I could stop this person from exchanging Shea dollars for US dollars is to make that illegal, right? So I printed money. I still have an exchange rate, but I essentially say is, whatever worker, I know you're holding Shea dollars, exchange, you cannot exchange that. So what we call that is capital control. And capital controls are telling investors or individuals that there's limitations in how they exchange their money. So the good thing about this is that I can print money to control my economy. So that's monetary autonomy check. And I do have exchange certainty because I put control of that. But the problem is it's going to limit investment and lending because nobody likes to be told what to do with their money. And as soon as investors hear that countries are putting limits on how you can exchange their currency, they are going to exit that economy as soon as possible or never enter it in the first place. Right? And you can't have sort of this monetary autonomy, fixed exchange rates, and the absence of capital controls because of the scenario I talked about before. Again, think about there's a pile of money somewhere in the economy, and everybody rushes to exchange that for whatever it's worth, whether it's gold or US dollars. As soon as that reserve, whether it's gold or whether it's US dollars, disappears, whatever money is left over, whatever hasn't been exchanged, is not worth anything. And so unless you impose that people can't exchange at the kiosk or at the treasury, that's not going to work. Okay. So let's go back in time again. So this is the fall of France and the German occupied Paris, and we can see the lead up to this is how much each government was spending on military expenditures into the lead up of World War I. And if you compare these two columns, let's go back there. If you compare these two columns, you see that Germany was able to spend a lot more than France. And one of the things that France was limited to was its gold standard, right? So France was in its gold standard for these years. And it's after they got rid of the gold standard that it's like finally were able to increase its military spending. But at that point, you see that it's really too late, that Germany has already increased its military spending. It was able to do so because Germany printed money as much as it wanted, and it had capital controls. And it got rid of its gold standard, so it didn't really care about the exchange rate, right? The French really chose to keep the value of the franc, which was their currency, and did not want to spend more or print money because it would have unsettled the value of the franc. And what that really did was undermine French security in the 1930s and 40s. Right? And the difference here is Germany abandoned the gold standard right away, so didn't really care about the exchange rates and could print money as much as they wanted. And France abandoned the gold standard in 1936. Right? So in 1930, France and Germany have no capital controls, meaning that there's no limitations on your ability to exchange francs for gold or Deutschmarks for gold. Both were on the gold standard. Neither could print money whenever they wanted, right? They don't have monetary autonomy. 1934, France and Germany have no capital controls. One stays on the gold standard, that's France. The other one gets off the gold standard. And so if you're off that gold standard, you have a flexible exchange rate, you can use monetary autonomy to manage your government. Germany, in addition, sort of did add capital controls, specifically in 1936. So this is the famous year of the Olympics. Jesse Owens running for the Americans. Anybody who visited Germany that year to attend the Olympics had to pay in foreign currency. Right? And and they could not leave with any foreign currency. So whatever you came with, you had to spend. And so that's a form of capital control, right? And so that's what gave Germany more control over its monetary policy in 1936 and forward. Okay. So this illustrates, again, this unholy trinity, illustrates how sovereigns with no capital controls, which is fairly normal, countries usually don't have capital controls, can have the ability to print money or have a fixed exchange rate, but they cannot have both. And I like to make the analogy to law school is you have to choose two things. You can either have good grades, you can either have a social life, or you can either sleep. And so you have to pick two of those. So if you want good grades and sleep, you can say goodbye to your social life, or if you want to have a social life and sleep, then forget about the good grades and you get the extra. And this is the same idea with finance. And this is probably one of the most important things IPE. So if you think about what you learned in IPE, of course you learned about trade and how domestic factors learned about trade. You learned about the importance of debt. I think the unholy trinity of finance is probably the third most important, or one of the three most important things to learn about IPE is you can have two of these things. You can have capital mobility, meaning you have no capital controls. You can have monetary autonomy, but that means you can't have fixed exchange rates, right? If you have a fixed exchange rate and you have monetary autonomy, you have to get rid of your capital controls. But for countries now, for the United States has monetary autonomy. We can print money whenever we want, and we have capital mobility. We do not have a fixed exchange rate. Right? And before the Bretton Woods system collapsed in 1971, the United States had a fixed exchange rate, $35 for an ounce of gold, and we had capital mobility. When the United States tried to print money under that system, we saw that countries took advantage of that, or individuals took advantage of that, and tried to exchange US dollars for gold until the gold supply ran low. And so you can't violate this unholy trinity of finance. It's part of what you do. Countries have to decide. China has a fixed exchange rate and mostly has capital mobility, so it doesn't have a lot of monetary autonomy. And so that's a decision on what you want to do. And it really comes down to is, do you want to have a stable currency versus do you want to have the ability to use money to manage your economy? And the United States has decided to do the latter, using currency to inject liquidity in the markets when needed, using interest rates to manage the economy. And the reason why the United States can do that is the United States has such a high demand for its currency. People want US dollars. So it doesn't really have to worry about the stability of its currency, whereas other countries don't have that advantage and prefer to have the fixed exchange rates rather than monetary autonomy. This trade-off, again, it's very important, is a political problem, as governments have these two choices: keep monetary autonomy or keep the fixed exchange rate. This affects states, whether you're going to lend money, whether you're going to invest, whether you're going to trade, but it also has domestic effects. Whatever decision is made, you're going to have winners and losers. So think back to the Wizard of Oz example, is the losers of the gold standard in the United States were the farmers because they couldn't get enough credit to invest in new technologies or new fertilizers or new irrigation because there wasn't enough credit in the U.S. financial system. So they're the losers. And the winners were the people who wanted to have a more stable currency. Right? Currency decisions are highly contentious. They have big distributional consequences in domestic economies, and of course are a big part of political discussions. Okay, and that is the end of currency, and leaves us to the end of our discussion for our next exam. After the exam, we'll begin our new topic of international development.